Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review. And today we are going to be talking about a 10-year whiskey, a new release for 2024. It should have pretty decent distribution. I actually just found this randomly sitting on the shelf, no back counter, no nothing, just sitting there for MSRP, which is $70. So interested to hear what we're talking about? Stick around. Thanks for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. Well, today it is the year of the ryes, so we are going to be talking about another rye here on the channel. I just keep coming across good rye whiskey in 2024, the year of the rye. And today we are going to be reviewing the Knob Creek 10-year. This is the 10-year rye, new release, comes in at 100 proof. And I heard this was coming out, but when I found it on the store shelves at Party Source, I really had no idea that I was picking this thing up at the time, had no idea that it actually had dropped. I just heard it was announced fairly recently. So with this one, should be more of a standard release, so keep an eye on it. Maybe a cast strength one will come later this year, but for now, we have the 100 proof version. And this did ring $70. We'll get into the stats here again in just a moment. For the most part, we already ran through them all. And for those that don't know, when it does come to Knob Creek, they kind of have like a barely legal rye mash bill. So there is some corn in there as well. So let's pull up the stats, but I mostly already highlighted everything. Price, $70. Got it from Party Source. Age stated at 10 years. And this one is 100 proof. So let's dive in to the nose, to the palate, and then we'll go through the scores. Cheers, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining so far. There is something about this nose, and I'm curious to hear if anybody else has this immediate impression. But every time I get a whiff of this for the first time in the glass, the oak comes through, and it smells amazing. But then I go to it a second time, and it's like I acclimate to that oak, and then it's not as prevalent anymore. Drives me nuts every time, but this is about the fourth time that I've had that exact experience. But predominantly on the nose, yeah, it is initially that oakiness, a lot of spice, but it gives way to that cherry note that you can sometimes find in a Jim Beam product. There is definitely a layer of citrus there as well that you probably expect with the rye. And it then comes across as minty, but it's also a deeper mint. It pretty much gets into pine, not just mint. And also a little bit of nuttiness that you'd expect too. So for the most part, the nose plays out as you would expect, though maybe the mintiness and the pine might throw some people off. But otherwise, typical Jim Beam profile, particularly for their ryes, with the nuttiness, with the cherry, with that added layer of oak. All right. For the nose on that one, I do enjoy the nose. It's always that initial burst. So I'm going to give the nose a thumbs up here, though I did teeter a little bit, whether it would be thumb sideways, but going thumbs up. All right, let's go in for a taste. You know, initially on this one, it hints at some really good flavors up front. The pine and the cherry almost immediately comes through as it's just sitting there on your tongue. Nice creamy mouthfeel. And then there's this vanilla cream sensation that I get, particularly running across the sides of the tongue. Kind of takes over. Really, really good. Doesn't even, other than that pine note, come across as a stereotypical rye at first. Then when we get to mid-palate, the nuttiness really takes over, and a lot of the flavors kind of mute down a little bit. Reminds me a bit of a Booker's initially, but as I said, being proof down to 100, I feel like the flavors do come down compared to something barrel strength as a Booker's. Uh, Other flavors are essentially the same. That sweet cream and that pine continue to play through. So when it comes to the palate on this one, just did this one a thumb sideways. Loved what it was doing initially, but once you get to kind of mid palate, everything kind of, dampens a little bit. The volume on everything comes down, doesn't give me as much flavor as I was expecting. And that oak also doesn't come back, though it does come back on the finish. And we'll get to that this next step here. So cheers, everybody. So on the finish, that nuttiness subsides. That sweet cream definitely plays through. And the pine really does start picking up. The pine, the cherry, the citrus. And then once you get past all those flavors, that is when the oak finally reemerges. Kind of bookends this whole experience, really, because I talked about the oak on the nose and how it initially shows up, and then it disappears. And it kind of does the same thing on the taste. It's not really there, and then it shows up at the end. Even almost comes across, some people might think it even comes across a little tannic. I don't think so. I think it's fine. But I do like how it finishes there. So on the finish, I am going to bump it back up to a thumbs up. So I'm going back and forth here. As you can kind of see, really like the flavors that it does bring. It doesn't bring as much flavors as I was expecting, though, for something 10 years and 100 proof. So in the end, between all the metrics that we do behind the scenes here, the flavor score comes out to a 77.5 out of 100. Experience score is a 76, and the value score is a 90. At $70, I feel it's kind of comparable to, let's say, the Bullet 12-year. That is a little cheaper, though the proofs are different too. So it kind of sits in a strange spot on the shelf when it does come to the price relative to other ryes. It does have the age statement, but doesn't necessarily outbattle flavor-wise with some things that are on the shelves that are 6-7 years. So final score in the end gave it a 78 out of 100. That ranks it 26 out of 35 bottles reviewed so far this year. So, and then all time 124 out of 187 bottles. So it does sit kind of in a above average kind of spot. If you find this and you buy it, I think you'll be happy with it for the most part. Just keep in mind that mintiness and that pine. I know that can be a turnoff to some people that have tried this pour. I dig it. I dig the flavor combination. I am looking forward to something that is cask strength at 10 years, but where it kind of sits right now, it's just a nice sipper, start the night. It's something that's going to end up on more of my first floor shelves with where I kind of put like a bunch of shelfer type bourbons rather than the stuff I keep in the basement. So that concludes my thoughts here on the Knob Creek 10-year rye. Solid rye, but doesn't really necessarily stand up to my expectations of it based on the age statement and based on everything that I love with Knob Creek. I've probably had some 6-year picks of the Knob Creek that stick out in my mind higher than necessarily what this offers at this time. But also, I do think it's something that is very accessible, very inviting, especially if you like that pine note in a rye. So you're going to have to interpret my words into your own flavor profile here. So that concludes my thoughts here on the Knob Creek Rye. If you have had the 10-year version, let me know in the comments what you think. What are your impressions of it so far? And would you recommend it to the rest of the people that come across your comments? Well, thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. I'll catch you on the next whiskey review. Goodbye, everybody.